I know a lot of time when we think of law, it's always in a disputes context. But in this case, each party is actually cooperating with the others to create something new altogether, which is something which I personally enjoy quite a bit.
But yeah, no, that sounds very interesting in terms of, like, I guess there's so many bits in there, communication across borders and all those things which sound really interesting about it. I guess I'm just going to, before I move on to you, Sophie, for an introduction, the question which I asked Charlotte, I'd kind of extend to you is, did you know when you were kind of maybe the same age as some of these students who are on the line, 16 to 18, that this would be where you were sitting, or this would be your dream job? Was it something you knew about at that age, or something that could be perfect for you?
Absolutely not. I don't think I even considered law as a serious career option till I got into law school, which was purely by coincidence. My mom just encouraged me to write the entrance exam, and I got through, which is when I actually took it seriously. So no, I think I wanted to be a detective when I was that age, probably. So yeah, I just fell into it. But once I did, I realized that I actually really enjoyed it. And like Charlotte mentioned, I did think that my skill set was also suited towards it, because it's a lot of research, it's a lot of drafting, a lot of talking to different individuals. So I think, yeah, it was definitely not planned.
No, that's really good. We've got an actress, we've got a detective now. I'm joking. And so it's really good to see how you can come from these different backgrounds and think about finding this dream job at the end of it. So Sophie, what about you? Maybe is it okay if I hand over to you to give a bit of an introduction?
Yeah, of course. So I came from state school as well. I did economics as a degree, so I wasn't a law student. I did do law at A level though, and to be honest, it was a bit of a sort of a 50-50 coin toss of which one I was going to go and do at university. But when I was visiting the various universities I'd applied for, I went to Loughborough, and I loved the campus. I loved the people. I loved the atmosphere there. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to go and study here. And the economics program was very good at Loughborough, so I thought I'll do economics. So it wasn't really sort of, I wanted to be a lawyer from day one. I actually went and studied something completely different. I loved studying economics, and I actually went on to the grad scheme at an investment bank before I came here. So I did that for 8 years, learned a lot, but then kind of decided that I wanted a new challenge and wanted to do something else. So I applied directly to the A&O training contract. So I didn't do a VAC scheme, and sort of came through that path. So I had to do the GDL, as Charlotte mentioned before, so the law conversion course, which was really, really interesting. It reminded me exactly of doing law at A level and reminded me why I loved it back then. So it was really nice to kind of top up my knowledge and do that course. So currently I am in a sort of specific area of corporate law. So as Charlotte and Ashna have both mentioned, if you decide to take over a company, we will help you do that. But the first thing you sort of ask yourself when you take a company over is, how much do you think that company's worth? How much are we going to pay for it? So one of my roles is looking at the various things that company owns to decide how much it's worth. So our team looks at a company's intellectual property. So you're looking at logos, you're looking at website design, you're looking at maybe TV jingles, things like that. We also look at things like patents. So for things like pharmaceutical companies and telecoms companies, they invent all these various things that are then become extremely important to what they go on and sell. So we will also help value those.
That's great. And you kind of touch upon there some things which are part of the role of a corporate lawyer, which I don't know about any of the students on the line, but I wouldn't necessarily have thought of firsthand. So kind of jingles which are associated with companies and all those elements which are part of corporate law, which is really interesting to get kind of an idea around all the different aspects which are involved, not only like the economical side, which Ashna mentioned earlier. So that's really good in terms of now we know who our panelists are and kind of the journeys they've come through. So 3 very different routes in. And what I kind of wanted to just ask and touch upon again here, and Charlotte, I know, thank you for the brilliant overview of corporate law as a whole. Would it be possible just to give us a view in terms of what does it mean to be an associate, from a trainee to an associate? What's that journey, and what, just explain very briefly kind of what that looks like and what that actually means. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. So a trainee usually kind of is in more of a support role within their team. So they tend to offer support to associates and partners. And generally, the way that a team structure works in corporate is that you have a trainee, you have an associate. Sometimes you have a senior associate, but not always. And then you pretty much always have a partner. So that partner tends to be the person who has the relationship with the client. And so in effect, an associate will tend to do the bulk of the work, in the sense that they will do a lot of the drafting, they will kind of lead the deal, they will be the ones that kind of negotiate certain terms with the other side's lawyers. A partner tends to be there to kind of give advice on specific nuanced points of law, and they also tend to be there for kind of more wider points. So, you know, to kind of read the document as a whole and make sure that there's nothing there that kind of is an issue. And a trainee obviously provides support. So, you know, we will tend to kind of exchange documents with the other side. We will deal with kind of ancillary documents. And what I mean by that is kind of documents that aren't core to the deal, but that are obviously still really important. So things maybe like confidentiality agreements and things like that. But an associate's role pretty much is to kind of lead the deal and to do the bulk of the work in that sense. And it's a very different role, trainees and associates, but I tend to think of your training contract as kind of a 2-year practice to become an associate. So as you kind of get through your training contract, as you move into different departments, you tend to get kind of more associate type work, so more drafting. You get to kind of lead deals a little bit more, you get to converse with the other side a little bit more as they kind of prepare you to go into that role of associate. I don't know how the other two may have something to add to that, but that's kind of my interpretation of an associate within corporate.
That's amazing, thank you. And it gives us a really good idea in terms of a step towards what you can see on the screen now, which is understanding a little bit more about what a typical day looks like for those different kind of roles as you work through that process of moving from a trainee up to an associate and senior associate, as Charlotte mentioned. I wonder, I'm just going to extend that question. I know it is quite a difficult question in terms of what a typical day looks like for you, because I don't think many people have a typical day, but maybe to you, Sophie, what does a typical day look like to you in your role at the moment?
So at the moment, obviously my typical day is slightly different because I'm working from home. So in the office, when you're a trainee, you usually share an office with either a senior associate or a partner who would then help you through your training contracts. So at the moment, my first thing I do is I have a daily call with the partner I work for. So she can check in and see how I've got on the day before, check in and see what work I have for that day. So just to make sure I kind of know what I'm doing. So that's nice that we still have that contact, even though we're all working from home. Typical day is usually responding to requests from the associates and senior associates and partners in our team asking for assistance from a trainee. So sometimes that will be drafting a sort of a side document, as Charlotte mentioned. As I work in intellectual property, sometimes that is going and doing trademark searches. So a company will say, we own this trademark. So say like the Nike tick, we will go in and actually verify, yes, they legally own that trademark. And if they wanted to sell that right, they can. We also join client calls. So it's really good to listen to the partners and the associates sort of negotiating the more senior documents. As Charlotte said, being a trainee is kind of a practice. So it's good to sit in on those calls and listen to how the role actually works and what you would have to do in the future. So that's really, really good to kind of get that knowledge and understanding.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's a very good point around how we're all adapting at the moment. And it's really interesting to understand how the different industries, and as a corporate lawyer, how it does adapt to kind of a world working more virtually. So that's a good overview. Thank you. So Arshana, I guess I'm going to extend maybe the second question to you maybe. So you spoke about your experiences and not necessarily having known that law was for you at that stage. Looking back at your kind of 16, 17-year-old self when your mum was encouraging you to do the application, would you give yourself any advice that you might have done differently, or just some advice to someone who's at that age now?
Well, I think one advice that I would give is be broad-minded when you're trying to figure out where you want to go or what you might want to study. I think a lot of times at that age, you don't really spend enough time researching or thinking about what different career options are open to you. That's not to say that if you don't decide to do law, or if you decide to do law, then you're closing your options, and that if you study law, there is no other alternate career available for you, or if you don't study law, you can never be a lawyer. But I just think that one advice that I would have given to myself is that at that stage, I wasn't really thinking about what I want from a career. It was more just to see, okay, where do I want to go for university? And I think even at the age of 16, 17, we should try not to be short-sighted in our thinking, and you should see what interests you and where you think you might actually want to, what you might want to spend the rest of your life doing. It isn't set in stone, but there isn't any harm in spending time thinking about it. And there are so many people around you that you can approach, your parents, their friends, whether you have siblings. It's always good to like try to reach out to other people, talk to them, just to see what they're doing, what kind of career path they take. Just so it gives you like an idea as to what options you have. I think, yeah, that's one of the biggest advice that I would give.
Yeah, definitely. And so two things there, which are so important, like keeping your options open. And I know lots of the students on the line might not necessarily be set on a legal career, but they're just interested in how you got your dream job, which is also something which is really interesting to understand. But also secondly to that, kind of the importance of influences in your life and their recommendations. I think those are two great pieces of advice. On top of that, Charlotte, I know is there any other pieces of yourself looking back on the way you've played things and gone through your journey? Anything else you'd add to that?
I think I'd just say really do what you enjoy at university. So, you know, don't feel like you have to be kind of put into a hole and think, you know, I have to study law, or, you know, I have to study economics in order to be a lawyer. You know, I know loads of people who have studied English literature. I know people who, you know, who've studied actually things like theatre studies, as an example. You know, you are not restricted based on what you've done at university. And I think it's more important to go and really enjoy your time there, because, you know, it lasts for 3 years, and you'll blink and you'll be 24 and think, what, I swear I was 18 2 minutes ago. So, you know, I think really enjoy yourself. And I think as well, you know, obviously listening to the influences in your life is really important, but also don't be afraid to kind of have an opinion of what it is that you want to do as a career. And, you know, people might tell you, oh, you know, I don't know if you would be a very good lawyer. I don't know if you'd be, you know, great at standing up in court, you know, things like that. Everyone has a different idea of what a lawyer is. And so I just wouldn't want anyone to kind of rule it out as a career because they think, you know, oh, I don't act like Mike Ross from Suits. You know, it's totally different to what you probably expect it to be. And I just want people to know that anyone can be a lawyer, and yeah, don't let people discourage you if it's what you want to do.
Definitely, that's a great element to add on there. And I could see Sophie kind of nodding in agreement there. So I guess from your experience then of maybe making some different decisions throughout your journey, what helped you make those decisions and find and take a different path, and second to that, I guess, any other bits of advice you'd give on top of students who are making those decisions which you've had to make in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely echo what Charlotte said about going to university and studying what you enjoy. As I say, it was a coin toss for me on whether I did economics or law because I enjoyed them both. So I definitely do something you enjoy. If there is something you would rather do now at university to test whether that might be the right thing for you, sort of don't be afraid to go ahead and do it. As I hopefully can show, you can do something completely different and then decide a little bit later on in life that you want to go and be a lawyer. I mean, if I'm honest, I was probably scared of being a lawyer at your age. My idea of a lawyer was someone standing up and arguing in court, like that terrified me. And I thought, maybe it's not for me. I'll go and do economics. But having now spent time having a different career and doing something else, I really enjoyed that. But I wanted a new challenge. I wanted to try something different. And I looked back and thought I did really enjoy law at A-level. I think actually being in the working world made me realise not all lawyers stand and argue in court. There are a lot of corporate lawyers that do all of the interesting background research work that doesn't involve you having to stand up in front of people, which I was terrified of doing. So I researched into how to make that career move. So when I did the graduate diploma in law, so the GDL, I actually did that part-time. So it is a full-time 1-year course, but you can actually study it over 2 years part-time as well. So I went to school every other Saturday while working during the week to study the GDL, which was really good for me because it allowed me to kind of dip my toe back into the legal world to check it was the right move for me before quitting the job I already had, really. So I did the GDL part-time and realised that I was really enjoying it, and I would like to make that move. So as I said earlier, I applied directly to A&O for a training contract, and luckily they took me.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice as well. And in terms of like doing your research, and I think all the students are doing that right now, and I'm impressed by the fact that you're, you know, hearing firsthand from our guests today about how they're finding it is a good way of doing that and deciding whether law might be for you or this position might be for you. So, and that's a great piece of research. I know that I've got a million questions, but I've seen that we've got over 20 questions in our Q&A box. So I want to hand over. I'm going to start going through some of the questions that the students have asked in light of time. So we've got a few anonymous questions come in, so that's completely fine. Students, if you don't want to share your name, that's absolutely fine. So the first one came in. So can associates become partners? If so, how? Charlotte, I know that kind of tied into your overview earlier, but that is the case then, isn't it?
Yeah, so you go trainee, associate, senior associate, partner. So that's the progression that you take. And it kind of tends to be after 2 years of being a trainee, you become an associate. Then kind of around 5 years of being an associate, you become a senior associate. And then it varies depending on different factors. But, you know, sort of 5 to 10 years after becoming a senior associate, you kind of become a partner. So, yeah, you definitely can become a partner if you are an associate, but you absolutely don't have to, by the way. You know, some people decide that it's not for them. They maybe want to have, you know, different external kind of hobbies or interests or whatever that they want to focus their time on. So, you know, the linear path is not the only one to take. I just want to, you know, make that clear.
No, definitely. And I think we've got some, good examples of that. And so, but I guess it kind of ties into the second question, which is a really good question. Whoever sent that in, anonymously again, but I wanted to say, great question. How competitive is law? So, you know, it does have the reputation of being competitive and really a good industry to get into. Quite a difficult question, but maybe Arshna, in your experiences, how competitive did you find it doing it first in India and then coming over and getting that role here at Allen Overy?
Unfortunately, or well, fortunately, it is a fiercely competitive process. So even first getting into law school, you write an entrance exam in India, and about 5% of the people writing the exam actually get the university that they want. And then when it came down to applying to A&O, again, A&O takes about 3 Indians every year, which really is nothing compared to our population. So it is quite a competitive process. And from the other trainees who I've spoken to, even within the UK applying to A&O, it is competitive. But that said, it isn't impossible. I think if you focus on your application form and actually spend time doing it, it isn't impossible to crack. You do need to take out time to fill it up. You need to spend time researching on the form. You need to make sure that your reason as to why you want to pursue a career in law, get a training contract is solid. You should be a well-balanced individual. It isn't that A&O only takes toppers or it only takes people who have done certain kind of competitions or certain kind of activities. They do try to take holistic individuals, and they are looking to take people who are diverse, who pursue different things. So don't think that if I want to pursue a career in law, it's just my grades that matter. It is competitive, but I think if you spend time on the application form and if you try to make your application stand out and show to the firm that you are suited for them, it isn't impossible to get.
That's is so relevant because I've got a bit of background, not sure if you can hear me, but that's really relevant because Mariam has just asked, this question's for Ashna, how hard was it to get into a Magic Circle law firm when you did not study in the UK? You've kind of already answered that with that question. Is there anything else you'd add for Mariam on that point? But you answered it pretty eloquently there, so don't worry if there isn't anything else to add on top.
There isn't something specific, but if anyone who is looking to apply and they aren't doing their university from the UK, I think these law firms don't focus on you having an existing base of knowledge of UK-based laws, which is why even if you have an unlaw law, it is very easy to switch to a law firm. They expect you to come in with no actual legal knowledge, and they train you, which is why you spend 2 years doing a training contract before you actually become an associate. So that 2-year period is for you to learn and grow and actually develop an understanding of the law. So I think that's one thing that you can keep in mind.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. So another question from Giali. What advice would you give to getting valuable work experience in law, especially during a pandemic? Very good question. Sophie, did you go through the process of getting some work experience before your transition to law?
So from a work experience perspective, it was more, I guess it wasn't specific work experience. For me, it was more understanding the industry a little bit more. So I did a lot of panel sessions like these. So I was on an app called Legal Cheek, which I'm sure you've all heard of, which do a lot of sort of panel sessions at various firms. So luckily, when I was looking at it, we weren't in pandemic times, and those were held in person at law firms all over the city. So I would go and attend, meet people that were applying. I'd meet the lawyers at those firms, sort of networking and just understanding a little bit more of what the industry was like. And that was all I needed when I applied and I interviewed, to show to A&O that I was really keen about changing my career and being a lawyer. So I would say work experience is really important if you can get it, and I would definitely try, but don't feel bad if you can't get it. It's like Ashton said, it's a very competitive industry, and sometimes it may just be difficult to get work experience, maybe because it's a pandemic, maybe because you don't live in London where a lot of the opportunities are. So I think just there's a lot of online things now that you can do, and panel sessions you can join. And I think A&O do offer work experience. Sue had mentioned this to us before the call to mention if it was brought up as a question, and all the information for that is on A&O's website.
That's great, thanks Sophie. Yeah, and that's a good point. And also for that question around during COVID, like the fact that you're here and learning now, like you can talk about that in later applications. You're using this time, you're being very proactive by being on this webinar today, so that's definitely something to mention. So another question from an anonymous attendee. So I'm in year 13 and I'm trying to use this time in lockdown to decide my career plans for the future. I'm in 2 minds and I can't decide whether to go into a path in law or into an art degree, and was wondering if anyone has any advice or guidance on how to decide, or what the most important factors to consider are. Charlotte, I'm going to ask you this one. I know that you did kind of touch on the fact that when you're younger, it was more of a creative role, and not to say that you were in 2 minds, but maybe what advice would you give if you were in the process of kind of weighing up 2 quite different options, and what the most important things are?
Yeah, I'd say I was definitely in 2 minds. For a long time, I was wondering whether I wanted to go to and apply to RADA or do some kind of drama school. Ultimately, for me, I took a step back and thought, what do I actually want from a career? And, at the time, I kind of realized I wanted kind of career stability. I wanted quite clear progression. I wanted to be able to deal with kind of problems and find creative solutions, which I always really enjoy. So for me, I kind of realized that law was probably right for me. But having said that, going back to what I said earlier, if you did go and do an art degree, for example, and then you went and did the GDL, that's definitely not to say, you could never be a lawyer. I think one thing, I would say is that getting on to the GDL with a firm sponsoring you to do that is always quite competitive. And if you were to do an art degree, it's not to say that you'd be precluded from doing that, but you would need to probably go the extra mile in order to show that you do have a genuine interest in law, because obviously you can't display that through what you've learned in your degree. So I think in that case, I think don't do law because you think that that's the only way that you can get a career in law. Do something that you enjoy. Spend the next kind of 4 years, you know, enjoying what you do and gaining new skills and etc. But also just be mindful of the fact that coming and doing these kind of things, learning more about law, talking to lawyers that you maybe have met on networking sessions such as this, really gives you an opportunity to be able to display your interest in law when it comes down to it. So yeah, I think do what you enjoy is probably my biggest piece of advice.
Yeah, definitely. And no, great point around the it doesn't cut off any options to you, but brilliant question as well, and what a good way today to learn a little bit more about one of those two options. So moving on to so many questions flooding in, so well done, students. We've got another 30 to go through. So Ria, would law with business or law with sociology at uni be a good degree thinking about corporate law? So Sophie, in terms of corporate law, do you know if those two would be relevant or ones which would be relevant and good to go
yeah,
through?
I think it's definitely an option. So when you do the legal practice course with A&O, you don't just do that course on its own. You actually do an extra couple of modules to make it up to a master's, and they are all about business and commercial skills. Now, a lot of firms, when they interview people, say, yes, people have a law degree or if they're interested in law, but people also need business skills. Like, we spend a lot of time talking to clients, emailing with clients, making sure they're comfortable with the service we're providing. And I think those commercial skills sometimes can be lacking in a law student. So we're encouraged to take those courses at the end of our legal practice course. So it's definitely a consideration when you're thinking about a course, maybe doing law with another skill. So when you do your interviews and when you do your applications, you can say, I'm not just a law student, I have done these other modules, and look at these other skills I've learned. Look at these corporate and commercial skills I have that maybe the other law students won't. It definitely could be helpful in setting you apart. But I would say caveat on the end, do those extra subjects because you enjoy them. Don't do them because you think you need them.
Yeah, definitely. And they both sound like if you have any specific questions around those two options that you're thinking about, then you can always get in touch with Pathway CTM and we can talk to Allen Overy about those kind of recommendations. So another good question coming from Karishma. Has there been a decrease in the number of M&A deals due to COVID-19? Do you think the recession will lead to more M&A deals to help companies survive, or will most companies turn to insolvency and restructuring departments? So a very kind of detailed question around practicalities of maybe the current climate. Ashna, I'm going to ask that one to you about your opinion and see what your thoughts are on that one.
Well, I think in the beginning, we definitely did see M&A transactions slow down, generally just because of how the market was. Existing deals slowed down because price had to be renegotiated. The market value of companies changed as well. So how was determined what should actually be the selling price for a company, which was earlier agreed upon the parties, no longer would apply because values were falling. So I think a lot of businesses did decide to put M&A on hold, but I think now as the lockdown is being eased, we are seeing another pickup in economic activity, including M&A transactions. There has definitely been an increase in the number of companies which are going towards restructuring and insolvency. That's because you don't just approach the R&I team when a company is insolvent. You actually try to approach them when a company is in any sort of financial difficulty due to the decrease in cash flow that's happening right now. A lot of these companies have taken loans from big banks and they're not in a position to repay those loans, and they might be defaulting on those loans. So in order to prevent that situation from arising, we are approaching the restructuring team to ask them, okay, how do they negotiate with banks, get an extension on their payment, or get like their interest to be decreased for the next 3 months and things like that. So we definitely have seen that the companies are going towards the R&I team, but that does not take away from M&A. And I think both are actually going hand in hand. We see several deals where the restructuring and the corporate teams actually collaborate together to help a company restructure itself and or to be maybe acquired by another company.
That's great. Thank you. Great question, Krishna, and great answer from Ashna as well. So moving on to a question from Elizabeth, which I'm going to ask to Charlotte. Have you ever had a mentor in the industry, and or even considered being a mentor yourself?
That's a great question. I never had a mentor at university, and actually, when I kind of was in my first and second department, I didn't really have a mentor then, but I moved into my second department back in September, and I started working with this associate. She's lovely, and just naturally we kind of developed a friendship that became very much more like a mentorship as well. So she very much kind of guides me through issues I might be having. She talks to me about my career and prospects, what I want to do with my life. You know, she was there when I was kind of having maybe issues with people that I was working with. Maybe they were kind of setting me difficult deadlines, and I just said to her, like, I don't know how to navigate this kind of situation. So having a mentor is really, really important, and especially, you know, as a female lawyer as well, I think having another female mentor has been really valuable to me. But having a mentor is genderless in a sense, because it's always great to have someone who's a little bit more experienced than you, telling you, you know, their experience, how they think you can improve, what you can put in your CV in order to get you know, more work experience, etc., etc. I would love to be a mentor. I think, you know, when I have a little bit more time, it's definitely something that I want to look into. I think maybe when I become an associate, I'd like to take on a trainee mentor, so someone who comes into A&O as a trainee, because I think it's really valuable to be able to give back to people, and it costs absolutely nothing to share your experience with someone else, but it could completely change their life. So yeah, I would encourage everyone on this kind of call to reach out to people that you maybe know, even if they're not in law, you know, even if they're in kind of different businesses, consultancy, you know, that kind of thing. They might be your parents' friends, they might be your friends' parents, you know, reaching out and just saying, do you mind if I ask you a few questions about X, Y, Z? I think is completely invaluable. So I'd recommend to anyone, try and get a mentor. Don't be worried about approaching people. I think everyone I've met at A&O and in my kind of circle in life has always been the type of person that would be willing to be a mentor and answer these kind of questions. So yeah, don't be afraid, get a mentor. Best thing to do, in my opinion.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more for any industry, and so great question. So a question directly for Sophie. Hi Sophie, was it difficult studying for the GDL?
No, I actually really enjoyed it. It's really interesting, and I think I wouldn't worry about being a non-law student and then going on to the GDL, because the GDL starts at the very basics. So the first thing you learn is you do a module called the English legal system that explains how the courts work, how you'd hire a solicitor, all of those very basics before you get on to sort of the differing sections of law. And it covers a lot of different types of law. So you go through, you do sort of a more theoretical module on sort of the history of law. You'll go on and do sort of things that are a little bit more complicated, so sort of like property and land law. So it's very well done. So you start with the easier things, and you start with sort of the history and the theoretics before you actually go into sort of specific areas of law you could go on and work in. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't be afraid going into the GDL. It's obviously not easy. If it was easy, everyone would do it. You have to work at it. But I would say that it's really interesting and really worth doing if you think that maybe there's another subject you'd like to do at university, and then go on and do the GDL later.
That's great, and it's great to hear that you enjoyed it as well, because it shows like the importance of doing a job which does bring energy in you, and it's something you're really interested in, which is great. And kind of leads on from something that Charlotte mentioned in her answer to a previous question. But Ashna, I'm going to ask you this one, which is, of course, share as much as you feel comfortable with. But have you ever faced any particular difficulties throughout your journey as a woman? Are there lots of women working at A&O? I mean, we can see from the panel that we've got a good representation today. But yeah, that's the question for one of the attendees.
I would say that A&O is the place which actually focuses on diversity quite a bit. There is no denying that law was initially known as a white man's career field. But I think that is changing. I think there is a lot of focus on diversity. There is a lot of focus on ensuring that women are comfortable at the workplace. We have like unconscious bias training, we have seminars, we have presentations, we have committees that are focused on ensuring that women at the firm have like an equal say and feel equally comfortable as their male counterparts. Personally, I have never faced any issue at the firm because I'm a woman, and I've actually always felt that whether it's my supervisor, the person who I sit with and who evaluates me, like Sophie had mentioned, or whether there's any of the other associates, they always treat all trainees very fairly. And I would like to believe that all associates are also treated fairly. I don't think any firm can deny that you will obviously see more male partnership than female partnership, but there is definitely an effort to change that. So yeah.
No, that's great to hear, and of course really important for as a company to be focusing on that. But and a very relevant question for students to ask at this stage when they're thinking about their future, and so I think, yeah, very powerful, good question to ask. We've got so many questions coming in. I'm going to ask another couple, and then just conscious of time because I want to make sure that we do get to kind of the wrap up and next steps of the session. So one last question. So for all, I'm just going to direct this one actually at Charlotte, if that's okay. So does part of your role involve representing clients in court? So yeah, is that part of the role?
So not as a trainee, and not really in corporate. I sat in litigation in my last department, so I got a chance to do a little bit more in terms of kind of court work. But in corporate, it's you tend not to kind of represent clients at court. As Ashna said earlier, it's not very there's not much dispute when you're working in a corporate deal because both parties kind of tend to want the same thing. And if there is a dispute, say for example, that would lead to kind of litigation where the companies are fighting and they can't work it out between themselves, you would generally pass that on to another person in the firm who fundamentally deals with that. What I would say is obviously this session is based on corporate law, but firms like A&O also have litigation departments within the company. So, you know, I wouldn't want anyone to think that being a lawyer is primarily being a corporate lawyer, because that's not the case. You can get involved in pretty much anything you want to do across the firm. As a trainee, you can sit in, you know, multiple different departments to make your mind up. So if that is your interest and you would like to stand up in court and you're a very you're a person who would enjoy that, then there's definitely room to get involved in that, but not really as a trainee and not really in corporate.
That's really helpful, thank you. That gives an idea and probably leads on quite nicely to some of the other sessions that we've got coming up. So conscious of time, all I want to say is like thank you so much for the students for asking so many questions, and thanks for all of the brilliant answers from our panelists. So we've been through that Q&A session. While I do our kind of final wrap up and next steps for students who've been on the line, if anyone does have some key kind of takeaways or comments they want to make on the session, then we'll keep our eye on the chat box as I talk through these last few minutes in terms of next steps and what's going to happen, because we'd love to hear your feedback or anything you've learned from today's session in that chat box. It's always really nice to see it and shows, you know, the engagement with all of the number of questions. Any kind of feedback was brilliant. So type anything, type away in the chat box as I talk through the next few minutes of next steps and how it's going to work from here. So this recording of this session will be sent out to all of the students who've attended the session today, and with that we'll go a survey to kind of get any extra feedback which you don't want to put in the chat box now, to kind of understand from the students who've been on the line where you are at in terms of wanting to move towards next steps into Allen Overy. This isn't our last session, which we're happy to announce with Allen Overy, so we will be here again same time next week. And as you know, students who are online, you do get a weekly newsletter in which has the link to sign up for week's session. So keep an eye out for that. Next week, we will be focusing on kind of resilience and the importance of that in your career journey and remaining positive. So that's a great follow-on from today's session, which has spoken a lot about some different journeys and how to get through to the same result through a different avenue. So it's been really good to hear. So you will get those follow-ups in terms of survey and recording. If you have anything in the meantime which you want to ask us about today's session, then do email in to student@pathwayctm.com. Just pop in your name, the fact you were on today's session, any questions, just so we know who you are and we can help you however best. I am conscious of the fact there have been lots of questions which we haven't got around to answering just because there have been so many brilliant questions coming in. What I'll do is I'll have a look through these questions, we log them all, and any that have direct kind of answers, we can reach out to Allen Overy and kind of get some answers to some of these questions where they might be from a particular person who wants to know that. Also, do follow us on Instagram at PathwayCTM just to keep an eye on upcoming events like today. It's really great to see that, you know, Elizabeth saying that she found the session really insightful, and Yadiv saying how helpful the session was in learning about the corporate sector. So, and a thanks from Sarah, which is really great, and Jake. So really good to see that coming through, and I really want to second that from all of the students. Thank you all. Thanks Sophie, thanks Ashna, thanks Sue, thanks Charlotte. It's been a brilliant session, and we're really grateful for your time. So any questions that anyone might have, do follow up on student@pathwayctm, and thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon next week, and we'll thank the rest of the panelists for your time.
Great, thanks everyone.
Thank you.